Good morning. It's Tuesday, March 15th, 2016. For our daily weather briefing, we've got quite a bit of weather to talk about today, possibly some severe weather tomorrow. So let's get into it and take a look at what's going on right now across the United States. And, pretty much on the West Coast, it's the same old story. We got showers and snow showers in the mountains with an onshore flow continuing there, although we're beginning to know that the high pressure system is beginning to bulge north. So rain is now moving north of San Francisco and primarily aiming at portions of Washington and Oregon. In the central portion of the Intermountain West, nice, cool, crisp air for a beautiful spring morning. In the Central Plains, we've got a strengthening disturbance here that's moved out of the Rockies, produced some snow back there yesterday. And this is what we're going to be keeping our eye on today and tomorrow as it translates to the east. But right now we have a band of showers and thunderstorms extending all the way from Canada down into Illinois ahead of the cold front. Actually, it's an occluded front, and a pocket of low pressure that's beginning to form out here just north of Tulsa, Oklahoma, that we've got to keep our eye on, and a lot of warm air just to the south of this. Temperatures already at 15Z in the low to mid 70s. And then if we go towards the east here, we've got a pocket of cooler air. Still, the northeast is fighting some winter there with some onshore flow, with a little bit of a low pressure system off of New York coast there, and some freezing precipitation in the mountains there. Temperatures generally ranging from 34 mid 30s all the way up to the 50s. Some warmer air will be translating east tomorrow. Looking at the watch warning map, not a lot in the northeast, just some winter weather advisories at this point in time. Moving into the Central Plains and southern and southeastern portion of the United States, again, we continue to have flash flood watches and warnings. Flash flood advisories and warnings. We also have some wind advisories and some high wind watches associated with the low pressure system that's going to wind up this afternoon in the Central Plains. Behind that low pressure system, fire weather watches as well as red flag warnings for very dry conditions that continue across the central portion of the United States with very little rain that they've had. Some winter weather advisories and winter storm watch now in effect for northern portions of Minnesota for the potential winter weather that's going to be happening there tomorrow as this storm winds up and moves towards the Great Lakes. And then we've got some winter weather advisories and some winter storm warnings in effect for the Intermountain West as disturbances continue to move off the Pacific into the west here. Now, looking at the satellite, the visible satellite, not a lot going on here. Most of the rain and clouds and precipitation is in the northern tier of the United States. Down here, some fog and some high cirrus clouds. But if you look at it in the Central Plains, this system doesn't look very strong at this point in time. So this we're going to have to watch, but we do have a pretty potent little low that's beginning to form out here just north of Tulsa. Looking at the western United States, this is the infrared photograph. Again, like we mentioned earlier, high pressure is beginning to build out here in the Pacific and will be translating into the southwestern portion of the United States. So most of California is probably going to miss most of the rain over the next couple of days as the main jet stream begins to be pushed more towards Washington and Oregon. Looking at our current radar at this point in time, not a lot of precipitation out there. Mostly a little bit of precipitation in the northwest with some scattered snow showers in the mountains. Our precipitation that we have in the Central Plains with some scattered showers and thunderstorms, and then some showers and a little bit of ice out there towards Maine and just off of Boston there. Some of this precipitation is mostly just drizzle associated with some fog and some low clouds, but nothing really major at this point in time. Now we're going to take a look at our severe weather analysis, and before we get started on today's severe weather, we're going to take a brief look at yesterday. Yesterday we had a slight risk of severe thunderstorms for portions of North Carolina, South Carolina, and dipping down into Georgia, and we thought that Georgia may get in on the action a little bit. Unfortunately, fortunately, it did not, and really, to be honest with you, this was more of like probably more of a marginal slight risk Not a lot of major weather, severe weather took place, mostly hail, which we expected. Very little tornado activity, although there was 4 tornado reports, which will probably be mostly the same tornado reports. So it'll probably be dropped down to 1 in Ohio over here, which did produce some damage, which was kind of an interesting situation that a storm just kind of popped up. And again, it's kind of a clear example and reminder to all of us that any thunderstorm this time of year can produce any kind of severe weather, and to expect it, because that area was not any slight risk at all. So it was in a general area at that time. So moving on to today's severe weather event, we do have an enhanced risk for severe weather for portions of northeastern Missouri, extreme southeastern Iowa, and western portions of Illinois, just a little bit west of Springfield, and then a slight risk that surrounds that area. This has been adjusted quite a bit, because at one point all of Indiana was under this, but some of it's been dropped, and there's a marginal risk and then a larger area for thunderstorms. To be honest with you, the conditions are not completely set in place yet. We're kind of wait and see mode with this whole severe weather event, in my particular opinion. Looking at the tornado parameters, looking at the tornado threat, about a 10% chance for tornadoes in that enhanced risk area there. So people will need to be alert to that. But really, again, any thunderstorm today could possibly produce a tornado. We just have to be alert. It's that time of year, and anything can happen. So now let's look at the current conditions and what's happening right now and what we think might happen with this severe weather event. Again, we have a low pressure system that's kind of forming around just north of Tulsa. It looks like around Coffeyville, Kansas there, or Coffeyville, Kansas. And we have a good slug of moisture coming up now along a warm front, and we have kind of almost 2 warm fronts here. One's more of a stationary front, but there's dew points around the mid and upper 50s in that area around central Illinois. And then just south of the main warm front, dew points are in the upper 50s to the low to mid 60s. But we do have flow off the Gulf of Mexico. Now, something to note here is the isobars are kind of shifted to the southwest here. It's not like a direct flow. This may be changing a little bit. We may have some backing of the winds later today. Is this sufficient for a major severe weather event? We like to see dew points in the mid to upper 60s to the 70s. That would be ideal. So it's not exactly the perfect scenario, but we've had some pretty big events along warm fronts with dew points in the mid to upper 50s. So you can't balk at the dew points at this point in time, especially this time of year, and a pretty strong surface low that's expected to form later today. Moving at the Cape values, convective available energy, potential energy actually. We've got the potential in here at 15Z. Not a lot right now. We didn't expect that at this point in time, but temperatures will be increasing here. We've been seeing some temperatures forecasted for today in the mid to upper 80s in parts of Arkansas, if that comes true. So we expect the convective available potential energy to increase quite dramatically, anywhere from between 1,500 and 2,000 joules in some of these areas, as some of the models are forecasting. That will be but translating further north to where the enhanced risks are and where the slight risk is located, the limiting factor is going to be the Cape values. The Cape values are not expected to get above really much between 500 and 700 joules per kilogram. So the stronger instability is going to be below this warm front, and it'll be determined whether some of that can get up here or not. Will determine what kind of severe weather situation we have developed later today. Looking at the inhibition, well, it's pretty clear the inhibition is right where the highest Cape values. And if you look at the current skew T-plots, it's going to be, and some of the forecasted skew T-plots, which we're going to look at a little later here, it's pretty clear why they're not adding this area in for potential severe weather, is because there's a pretty strong cap in this area from about St. Louis southward that pretty much is going to put the kibosh on any kind of severe weather potential there. Now, if that cap were to break, this would be a whole different ballgame, and that's something we're going to have to watch very closely. I can remember a couple of events where that's taken place in the past, where the potential wasn't there, and because of a very strong cap, but that cap eventually broke, and some pretty strong tornadoes formed at that point in time. We do have a very potent upper level surface low. We do have a very strong jet coming in. Looking at the charts from yesterday to compared to today, the charts yesterday weren't even forecasting this surface low to form. Now it's there, so there's still a lot of debate about this particular event here at this point in time. Looking at the lifted indices right now are not great. They range from about, I would say, from roughly 5 all the way down to maybe a -3 in some areas, maybe a -4. So most of our instability right now is again kind of weak at this point, but the potential is expected to increase as time goes on. Looking at our storm relative helicity. Helicity is pretty bold out there around Burlington, Iowa, around Quincy and Springfield. We have pretty high values, well, pushing there about 450 units. That's more than sufficient for rotating storms. We do have a pretty decent pocket of values, roughly around 400 around Louisiana. Again, that's translating north. So anything greater than 250 is pretty sufficient for rotating storms. So any storms that can form, there is a potential for rotation. We just have to keep that in mind. So we're going to have to monitor those. The problem is will they become surface-based or not? Looking at the EHI values, which is a combination of shear and instability, these values are not super high at this point in time, but we expected that. It's during the day, it's during the early mornings, and right now things are kind of still coming together, so we expect these values to change throughout the day. Now we're going to look at some skew T-plots here. We're going to look at, first of all, around Davenport, Iowa, and as you can see, this is at 18Z forecasted by the HRRR model, and right now they're saying there's a marginal tornado risk. The photographs are pretty decent, not screaming, but they're decent enough to indicate that there's a good potential for at least for a few tornadoes. Right now, the effective layer for the significant tornado parameters forecasting anything from about an EF3 down, low level EF3. Looking at the helicity, EHI values are in the around a 1. The lower level shear is around, or helicity is about 130. We'd like to see that a little higher than that. Supercell composite index is about a 5, and then the significant tornado parameter is about a 1. Forecasted CAPE values around 1600, which we kind of expect. LCLs are low enough. Lifted index is about -7. So yeah, I would say it's probably about a marginal to slight risk for severe weather. Looking at the plot here, there's not really a cap. The CAPE values, the limiting factor is going to be the CAPE. I don't know if the CAPE is going to get up to 1600 joules per kilogram. It may be a little less than that in that area. Just depends on how much moisture and sunshine we can get. Looking at Indianapolis, we went a little bit further to the east here, just to kind of compare. Right now, the parameters don't look that great at 18Z. If you look at 20Z, the parameters become a little bit more favorable for marginal tornado activity. But again, we're in early to mid-spring here, or actually early spring, and you lose a little bit of heating, you're going to lose some of that instability, and that's going to be the key factor here. I still think they're pretty far away from where the instability is, so I'm not too worried about Indianapolis area. I think they're probably going to have more of a hail risk at this point, but it's not going to be super great. I think still around the Springfield, Illinois, downward towards St. Louis, we'll probably see where the most severe weather will probably be at this point in time. Looking at St. Louis, now here we have a little bit more of an interesting situation with an 18Z. Even though the parameters are not off the charts, the CAPE values are a lot higher, around 2000. We do have a little bit of a cap development. The hodograph is sufficient for severe weather. Even though saying the hazard at this point in time is none, we're going to have to see what the instability becomes if we can break that cap. If we can't break that cap, right now it's forecasted to be pretty strong at 18Z. If we can break that cap, then things I think will become a little bit more potential here. Obviously, the EHI and shear values, or storm relative helicity values, are pretty weak at this point, and then a lot of that just depends on where the relation to the surface low is going to be. Looking at Little Rock, Arkansas, Cape values are going to be off the chart. We're going to be pushing close to around 2,500 to 3,000 joules per kilogram. Hodograph is not too bad. Shear, yeah, we don't have a lot of directional shear, but a lot of speed shear aloft. The concern here is the cap. The cap is going to be pretty strong. If for some reason we could break this cap, then we would have quite a little outbreak forming at that point in time. At least sufficient for some pretty strong thunderstorms with some large hail and damaging winds, and maybe a few tornadoes at that point in time. Let's move on. We're going to look now at the 15Z forecasted, or excuse me, the 21Z HER model radar forecast. And as you can see, even though the parameters are strong down here, there's nothing really forming. There's a little bit of something trying to form. The models are trying to pick up on in kind of south central or kind of north central Missouri at this point, maybe a little line beginning to form here. But most of the activities further to the north, with a kind of a weak low, maybe low-topped convective line of storms moving through Des Moines, but everything's pretty quiet at around 21Z today. So this is looking more and more like, if the models are correct, and I have my doubts on it at this point in time, they have not handled this storm system well at this point. It looks like it's going to be an event that's going to be later in the afternoon and evening, which means instability will be decreasing at this point in time. We'll have to see. I'm not sure I completely agree with it at this point. Looking at the winds aloft now, looking at the 925 millibar chart at 18Z, a decent little low-level jet from about 30 to 35 knots coming up through the Mississippi Valley there. When it gets into the areas where the enhanced risk is, it pretty much drops off between 20 and 25 knots. If we were going to have more of a tornado threat, I would think this would need to be at least 40 to 50 knots, and we just don't have that right now. Again, it could be the GFS here is underdoing this. We just need to monitor the conditions. Looking at 850 millibars, again, the strongest winds are south of where the enhanced risk is, and more of a southwesterly, not coming directly out of the Gulf of Mexico. So that kind of, again, limits the moisture flow in the enhancement of that with the storm. So that, again, is a limiting factor. Looking at 750 millibars, most of the storms, a good kind of venting and defluence here beginning to form as the trough is still kind of back here in the central plains, but translating into the Midwest. Winds here are generally between 40-45 knots. So storms will be probably clipping close to between 25-35 miles per hour from the southwest to the northeast. Now at 500 millibars, this is where the chart has just really kind of just not handled the situation well. Looking at yesterday's chart, we were looking at the forecast of a negative tilted trough with a potent jet stream at this level. This trough is still kind of in its positive phase, but translating to neutral. And we have a weaker jet here pushing between 75 and 85 knots. Still a decent defluent flow aloft. But the area that's going to be most unstable is going to be in the anticyclonic aspect of the jet. So that's again why we think there's not going to be as far as great as potential there. But again, we need to watch this. Obviously the left entrance jet is going to be forming right where the enhancement is for the severe weather today. But again, there's limiting factors there. Looking at the 300 millibar level winds, again, still strong jet, kind of a neutral, negative tilted trough at this level. A good diffluence aloft. But again, the areas that are going to have the most instability and most shear are in the anticyclonic aspect of this jet. They're going to be in the right entrance part of the jet, which seems to be more anticyclonic than cyclonic. So again, that's going to be a limiting factor here. Now let's move on to the aviation weather of this section. And right now we've got some general thunderstorms across Wisconsin and Minnesota with tops up to 33,000 feet. There's some thunderstorms that are off the eastern coast for up to tops up to 35,000 feet. And then I think this area will probably grow as time goes on with general other severe other thunderstorm convective activity later on today. Looking at turbulence, no turbulent segments at this point in time, but we expect some more to form later, especially with this jet that's going to be digging into the central part of the United States. I would expect some moderate turbulence, probably between 21 and 30,000 feet, maybe up to 38,000 feet. But, again, you also got thunderstorm activity too, so you need to be alert to that. No icing segments at this point in time, although I think there's a little bit of icing out here in the northeast and in the northwest that generally aircraft need to be alert to, but nothing major in the central plains at this point. Now we're going to move on to the 5-day forecast, and again looking at today's at 18Z, this trough is still in its kind of neutral phase. The energy is still way back here ahead behind the surface low. So the surface low right now is setting around Jefferson, Missouri at about 998 millibars. Now that, if we had a slug of moisture coming up, we'd be talking about a different situation today, but we don't. And just a lot of limiting factors for this severe weather potential. Again, it only takes one tornado to go through a neighborhood, and that makes it a major event. And so, you have to be alert to the fact that any thunderstorm can do the most unexpected possible thing. So even though we may have severe weather and the parameters may not look perfect, like in some circumstances, there is a lot of upper level energy, some upper level winds are coming in. Shear is somewhat decent, and it is spring. So even though the moisture and instability may be low, the potential could still be there for severe weather, and we need to take this seriously. Now tomorrow is an interesting situation because this storm really winds up, and this is way different from yesterday's model, because yesterday's model was showing this storm not quite as potent. Now it's kind of flip-flopped back to being more potent into the Great Lakes, and a little bit slower than a couple of days ago too. But we have a lot of energy moving into the upper Great Lakes and coming out here to Pennsylvania, New York. This is at 18Z. I would expect a line of thunderstorms that will form out here between within Canada all the way down to Ohio, and will be translating to the east. This, I think, will be a pretty strong wind event here, so I think people need to be alert to the fact that portions of western New York and western Pennsylvania, that this line of thunderstorms, most likely low topped, will have a pretty strong damaging wind component to it. That's my kind of gut feeling at this point in time. I do believe there may be some hail. Will there be tornadoes? Isolated at this point, but I don't think the tornado threat's that great. Again, the surface lows can be down to 981. We'll look at this more tomorrow when we do our daily weather briefing. As we move into Thursday and we see that trough begin to weaken and broaden, we have some more energy coming down the backside along the Intermountain West that's going to re-energize this low pressure system. High pressure ridge is beginning to bulge to the north along the western coast. This surface low that's over the Great Lakes kind of stalls a little bit and begins to weaken. Not a lot going on, just some snow and some showers and maybe some isolated thunderstorms and maybe some activity down here along the Gulf of Mexico, but not a lot of heavy stuff going on at this point in time. It's kind of a quieting down of the weather. Moving into Friday here, high pressure begins to form in the upper Midwest region, and quite a bit of dynamic weather is moving into the east here, but a lot of this is going to be moving offshore, so there's not a lot of weather that's going to happen here. There is a low pressure weak low pressure system kind of sitting south of Arizona at this point in time. And we're going to have to watch this and see how it translates towards the east here, but nothing really major. Mostly high pressure blocking storm systems from preventing them from coming into the west here, so things are going to kind of quiet down a little bit. However, that does open up the door for some cooler weather to come down into the central plains. We do have a 1033 millibar high that's coming down, and I expect some cooler temperatures to come down. Is it going to be super cold? Nah, I don't think it's going to be that cold, but it's going to remind you that you're still in early spring. Looking at Saturday, this trough kind of begins to form around the Cincinnati, Louisville area. Again, some energy there associated with it. High pressure is definitely not in a position though to give it much moisture, so there's not going to be a lot of moisture associated with this. So I expect some scattered showers and maybe some isolated snow showers as we see on the surface charts. Looking at precipitation here, we should begin to see some precipitation begin to build back here in West Texas as we have this weak low that's still sitting out here around Baja California, and high pressure that's moving down into western Texas. Easterly flow is going to be pushing moisture now back into Mexico, into the Mexican mountains, and into the eastern portions of Texas and New Mexico. Now looking into Sunday's forecast as our last day for this 5-day outlook, high pressure system dominates pretty much the west here. We do see a little bit of quite a strong storm system off the west coast here. This will be pushing mainly north as this high pressure system continues to build. So precipitation may hug the coast, but not a lot of precipitation moving inland. The low pressure system over Baja now translates a little bit further east into Mexico. We see high pressure over the southeast, pushing moisture now into Mexico here. I don't think a lot of it gets up towards the north here. I think the models are handling this pretty decently, as some very stable air kind of settles over this southeast. Low pressure system over the kind of the Midwest and Northeast is going to keep conditions cool there and somewhat unsettled. Not a lot, but it's going to stay unstable or unsettled. There'll be some different areas as some of these weak disturbances move through the flow. We'll see a few enhancements of some showers and maybe some snow showers staying place. So basically, to sum it all up, the severe weather potential today in the Midwest and tomorrow in the Northeast, I think mostly western portions of New York and Pennsylvania, maybe into the central portions, we'll see a pretty decent line of low top thunderstorms moving through. Today, the severe weather, we've got to watch it closely. But over the next 5 days, the severe weather potential really wanes. There's really not much to look at this point in time. Again, we are talking the models here. Anything can change. The one thing we do see, though, is it's going to be cooler in the east and warming up in the west. So we want to thank you for watching today. We'll keep you posted throughout the day on the potential severe weather that might be forming in the Midwest. We thank you for watching. Take care and have a great day.